This is an old Google map. I don't think there's a new one of the village. So you can see it's small. It has a 650 people. Um, and what we wanted to do was to have a field school that was both ethnographic and botanical, and but focusing most on the environment, the botanical side of the issue. So, what to go into a village and to get permission to be there, you've got to have meetings with lots of meetings with community members, community leaders of all kinds, of all ages, and explain the purpose of the field experience. Ask permission, obviously, and be sure that the community agrees with what you're doing. There, there's a there's an ethical question. The ethical question is, if we're bringing American children, students, they can be graduate students, not children, to the village, and expecting them to learn from the villagers, then we incur an obligation to make the experience equally as rich and valued for the villagers and people around that environment who live there. And so what we do is negotiate beforehand, before we ever bring in students, so that they will understand what we plan to do when we get there. Then ultimately have town meetings and group meetings so that villagers will understand that these students have been prepared for the for for what they're going to encounter and experience. So I'm not going to have a bunch of these pages with lots of words on them. I know that's not how PowerPoint's supposed to work. But you do have to ask permission to have several gringos walking around the community, and they need to know that our students have been prepared for what is in bounds and what is off limits, how they can behave in the community. Then another thing we do is incorporate as many villagers as is feasible as full-fledged students in the field school experience. So we got willing participants of the young people in the village who wanted to take part in this 3-week botanical ethnographic school. And that meant that they had equal responsibility as the American students to do the projects, to fulfill the work, and hopefully to learn something in the process. And then, of course, we incorporate empirically trained village experts as instructors. Now, let me say that for anthropologists, we call folks empirically trained if they have learned by doing, if they have learned by experience. I know other disciplines call them other things. I think we used to call them key informants as anthropologists, but that's no longer a very PC term. We don't like it. Okay. So someone, for example, who has really learned about the birds in the forest, someone who really knows the medicinal plants, they've learned that through experience, through listening to others in the area, and perhaps having that predilection be passed down in their family. So we call them empirically trained. And those are the kinds of people that we wanted to be part of the body of instructors to our students. Then we began the process of asking what projects might be helpful or meaningful to certain community members or to the whole community. We want the community member to understand that our students want to serve them as they learn, that our students need to find a project that is meaningful to somebody in the village, and that then you find that that person will be amenable to be the mentor for that student project. So that person who sees that there's something the student can do for them, then is happy to be a part of that. Okay, one of the first things that students need to do is to learn some cultural competency. Here we are in a Maya village, a Yucatec Maya speaking village. In fact, the first language of everybody in the village is Yucatec Maya. And so learning about the history and the prehistory of the region is paramount in the beginning of the class. This is one of our students, one of our Maya students, and while he really knew nothing about this wall plaque that is from actually down on the Usumacinta River of at Yaxchilan, and now hangs in the British Museum, but he saw something in it that he thought he recognized as something that is part of his culture today. And so he wanted to be able to express to the rest of the class what he saw in this very beautiful carving. One of the next things we do is just simple technique of mapping the village. Learn the family groups, because oftentimes the villagers are together in family groups in the village. And that gives the students a chance to walk around and say hello to people, let people begin to see them, let people begin to understand that they're going to be in the village. It orients the students to their surroundings, so you don't have to, lead them around the village all the time. They can go in small groups to find the bakery, or to find a little store, or to find the cemetery, that sort of thing, and get to know their environs. But also, it really gives a chance for the student leaders from the village, or from the students from the village, to be leaders and to be able to give their knowledge to their peer students, and it gives them a chance to exercise their leadership skills. A lot of times, some of the young people in the village are quiet and shy around strangers, and when they can be a leader about something they know, they really oftentimes really blossom, and you can get a lot of good information from them. Also, because we were going to be collecting plants in the forest, in the woods, it's called monte in Spanish, then we needed to get the kids up to speed on what was out there. So another map, and this required some of our empirically trained adults to help everybody get familiarized with the environment outside the village, and do an informal map of important points along the way. The blue dots and the yellow dot, these are all what's called cenotes, and there are 7 of them on the lands of Yaxuna. One of them has the water's yellow colored, and of course we know that's partly because of bacterial life in it, and it's also because of the way the sun reflects off the limestone. But for many years, the legend has been that that's where the Spanish threw a bunch of gold, and that's why it's yellow water. Cenotes are sinkholes in the limestone karst, the limestone ground that makes up the Yucatan Peninsula. And it's the fresh water that is available for use in the villages. And that was true in prehistoric times as well. So you always find archaeological sites around the cenotes. Now, when you have students who are going out into the woods to do collecting, they've got to know what to do in terms of safety. They need to be oriented where they are. They need to know that their compass and their GPS will work. They need their equipment in good order, what equipment they should take into the field for collecting. And then there are some more rules. It's kind of in the way, isn't it? Oops. Okay. So you don't take young people into the woods without them knowing what some of the dangers are. There are things out there that go bump in the day as well as bump in the night. And so you know, what plants should they only harvest with gloves, or perhaps not at all if it's a really harmful plant? What kinds of animals to look for? There are 4 distinctly nasty snakes in the Yucatan, and I see them very frequently when I'm there, including a coral snake, the large Yucatan rattler that can get very big. And then there are a couple of vipers, the virulence, that are pretty nasty fellows as well. So these are the kinds of things that kids have to know about. Now, this was not only a botanical school, but an ethnographic school, and ethnographers like me do what's called participant observation. We learn by doing and participating in the cultural activities, the common activities of the community. Many is the hour that I've sat around taking the corn off the cob with the older people while they're talking to me. I can ask questions. We can just kind of follow the rabbit down the rat hole into any kind of conversation, because we're sitting there, got to take the corn off every day in order to make their tortillas. And so it's a great time to just pitch in and do things. And it gives you a lot of free time to be able to really get to know folks. Okay. One of the things that we're doing here is that there are some community members who harvest a certain kind of vine that's really good for basketry. It holds up, it doesn't crack when it gets dry and old. It'll last for many, many years, won't fall apart. And the villagers let us be engaged in the process of collecting. They showed us how to do it. And then they showed us how each year they really harvest very judiciously. So even though they could make more money, make more profit, they know that if they deplete the forest, then they've shot the golden goose, basically. And we had a chance to watch the master start a basket and then make a beautiful basket. And then our guys tried the baskets too, and we all made kind of loppy floppy one, very not straight baskets, small ones, but it was a great opportunity, and we all had lots of laughs. None of us, believe me, could use our feet, though we tried a couple of times. So both in the ethnographic side of things and the botanical side of things, you're asking people questions, you're listening, you're watching what they're doing, and hopefully you're learning, gathering from the insights of people who are trying to help you understand about their environment. That means you've got to take notes. You've got to take good field notes, and teaching how to take field notes, both for the botany, what data do you need when you gather a plant, when you collect a plant, but also for the ethnographic side of things. What ethnographic information can you gather about this plant? What's it used for? Does it have a purpose in their social life or in their nutrition, for example? So field notes are paramount. And of course, sometimes if you're comfortable with it and good with it, field notes can be totally laced with wonderful illustrations. And you see here that one of the students, while listening to the folks who are teaching her about the plant, she's really got some fairly decent drawings of this plant, and that will help um, back when we're putting the data in the computer for sure for identification of the plant. And also taking photographs. You want to take photographs of the environment of the plant, but also take photographs of what folks in the village are doing. Now, when you take photographs of people, you have to ask permission if the person can be recognized in the photograph. And that's part of the training that we begin with, is telling our students how they can use photographs, when they can use photographs, and what they can do with them after they've taken them. Certainly, we don't want people in the community posted on, on Facebook without their absolute permission to do so. Now they use the young high school students use Facebook themselves, and they might want to post photographs that they might be very comfortable with it, but the older folks don't. And so you have to be very conscious of who understands what about social media. Then when you're out in the woods, people need to develop develop the sensitivity to look around and see what really is in your environment, what's different about the environment. And I think you can see that right around this kind of dark central place, there are some very green and large kind of lush looking leaves. That's because this is the face of a cenote, and that means that the area right at the edge is much damper and is conducive to growing these big leafed plants because they'll have a source of water. The rock itself, the porous limestone itself, is much damper and holds water better right at the mouth of a cenote. And also, you've got to be sure that your students are well aware of what cenotes are, because the water in that hole is about 20 meters down. So you don't want students walking into one for sure. And let me say about the knowledge of the plants in the field. Even the students who are from the village, and this is something that worries the elders quite a lot, the students from the village may not know a lot about the monte, about being out in the wilderness as they did before, as earlier generations did. These kids are the first generation to go through middle school and high school, because there is a middle school now in the village and high school in the county seat, which is about 19 kilometers away. So these kids have not had the chance to be out in the milpa, the cornfields, which are scattered way out in the woods, like their fathers and older brothers. And therefore, they have not learned the forest intimately. And so many people in the community were afraid that people were losing their ability to learn the monte. So while the kids are learning to gather the plants and learning about the plants, they're also learning about how to write questionnaires, how to do an interview with somebody. They need to know how to sequence the questions, so that, let's say you're taking some kind of life history. You start at the beginning, you start at birth, you start at early days, and then help their memory march along in logical time sequences, for example. And also, you want to think hard about your questionnaire, think hard about your what you want to get, what data you need for your project, so that by the time you get to the end of the interview, you haven't wasted the time of the person who graciously has allowed you to interview them, and so that you have the data you need. Nothing worse than coming back, and reading over your field notes and saying, oh, dang, I didn't ask that question. And worse, if you have to go back to the United States and you've spent a year in a village doing your research, and there's a whole question you never ask anybody. And now what are you going to do? So besides learning about the ethnographic side gathering of gathering specimens or of gathering data information, ethnographic information, then we need to know what makes a good botanical specimen as well. And what makes a good botanical specimen is a specimen that we call non-sterile, not a sterile plant. That means that it's got different parts of the plant that will help in specific identification, really get you down to the genus and species of the plant by using a key. If this, then this, if this, then this. And the real identification of a plant is through its flowers. It has the most telltale parts that allows you to figure out what plant it is. But also you can use fruits and seeds and roots. Then you gather information also about where the plant was. Was it on the ground? Was it in a tree? Is it a tree? Is it a forb? Is it a grass? GPS the plant so that you know exactly where it came from. See if you can say something about the color of the soil. Was it in the shade? Was it out in the sun? How tall was the plant? That sort of thing. A little bit beginning description. And all of that's written down on a piece of newspaper that you put the plant in and put in your plant press and carry around with you. Now, we've gotten back to the lab. We've collected a bunch of plants that day, and we need to prepare the specimens for drying. We just leave the plants in the newspaper, they're going to mold, and nobody can use a moldy plant. They're good for nothing. You've wasted your time. So you begin to look at the parts of the plant that you have, arrange them in the newspaper such that they can dry quickly and efficiently. And then you record the data, all that data I talked about that was written on your newspaper and in your notes, in your notebook. And then it goes into the computer in a list, and all of your specimens are numbered. And so the number corresponds to your notes. Here we are just getting plants ready to go into the plant dryer so they can get flattened and dried and then can be mounted on good archival paper. And one thing I really like for students to understand, let me see if I can get this out of the way there. For students to understand is that things can be simple. You can use what's at hand. One thing that's fun to do is just figure out what's in your environment that you need. You need separators for your plants because they need to dry with a lot of air circulating around them. And the separators can be something as simple as just cardboard boxes. So the cardboard boxes that we bought at the store that had our printer paper became part of our work. The boxes that we got at the store with our groceries in it became part of our work. We just cut them up into the right size and made the dividers that we need for the plant presses so that we could put them in the dryer. Checking the plants that they're separated, making sure they're flat, making sure they can go into the dryer. And then same thing, making a dryer. All you need is basically some wood or some bricks or blocks and some incandescent lights. Now, the problem is for botanists all over the world, we are losing newspaper because nobody reads a printed newspaper anymore, and we're losing incandescent lights. And for field botanists, this is getting to be a problem. But for right now, we still had enough of both so that we could make a good dryer. Now, one of the important things, and especially in having students who are from the village as equal partners in the learning experience, is showing them what the heck we're doing all of this for. Why are we gathering these plants? Why does anybody care? They're out there in the woods. We know they're there or we know some of them are there. So who cares? Well, actually, a lot of people care. A lot of scientists, a lot of environmentalists, a lot of very specialized researchers care a lot what's out there in those woods. Um, and also, people like me care because if I'm going to write an ethnographic article about the plants, then I need to have what's called a voucher specimen. That means I need to be able to say, I gathered this plant here in the village. I know it's here, and I can prove it because there's it's in the state archives. I put it there. So I can speak with authority about that plant being in the environment if I'm going to write about it. And so make time and make part of your budget to be able to show all of your students where the plants go. Rural community members may not be as familiar with the city. And so helping them to be able to understand how to negotiate to get into the city to find the herbarium can be a big part of a learning experience. And frankly, a lot of our American students didn't know how to get to an herbarium or what exactly an herbarium does. Why do they save all those old dead plants? That sort of thing. And so having somebody knowledgeable about the herbarium and showing it to the students is a big part of the learning curve. So this is the director, Ivan Morales, of the CC herbarium, the state herbarium in Yucatan. And so even most of our students had not visited an herbarium before and were amazed at many of the things that much of the research that can go on there and who comes and uses the herbarium. So here's the motley crew that we had when I was co-teaching this class with Dr. Will McClatchy, who is an ethnobotanist and a pharmacist. And when we accepted all the students, we realized we had people from 72 years old to 16 years old. We had some people who spoke only Yucatec Mayan, some people who spoke only English, some people who spoke English and Spanish, some who spoke English and Mayan, but only one person spoke all three. And that one person was actually a student and couldn't be with everybody all the time. So we thought, what have we done? We've made a class that can't possibly work. And it did. Everybody stepped up and helped it bring everybody along together. And I think if you simply make the expectation that there will be cooperation and communality and a common goal to get everybody to the end point, it can happen. Keep your expectations high, and it can happen. So I'm another one of my wordy pages, but I wanted you to see the final projects that the students negotiated with the people of the community. Learning what public knowledge of plants in the community that are already there that can control diabetes. That was one of the projects that one of the women in the group did a really good job with. Documenting folk understandings of the plants that prognosticate rain and when crops should be planted. The farmers still look at certain plants that are doing certain things at certain times of the year, and they can explain to you why it shows them it's time to plant or it's not time to plant. And interestingly, some of the plants that are not native to the Yucatan, one being, for example, the beautiful flamboyant, they say this plant is not Yucatecan. We know it didn't come from the Yucatan, but it has become Yucatecan because it's a very good prognosticator of rain. So that's a bit of ethnographic information that is really interesting. How the men know what plant to look at, what plants to look at to know when to plant their crops successfully. Measuring and cataloging plants in a government-sponsored forest reserve on their communal lands. There is a forest reserve. It's been there about 50 years. But we knew that there'd been poaching of the trees because the trees are very valuable. And so we wanted to see what trees were still there, how violated the reserve had become, and what trees were being poached. And we found some not so great information about some of that. And identifying plants that local healers use, and especially one of the healers wanted plants that were used for diarrhea and plants that were used for respiratory ailments, and concentrated on those plants, and then asked that a set of those plants be mounted as herbarium specimens and given to the school teacher in the nearby small village where this information was gathered, so that children could look at the plants and learn the names, know the names, and know what they were used for. The shaman and other healers who use this information call it defendiéndose, meaning that they say we have to use these plants so we can defendernos, so we can defend ourselves. We need to know what plants can be used even when there's no manufactured medicine available. And the same is true for starvation foods. If it got so bad that all we had left was what grows in the monte, would our children know what plants to be able to gather and use? So it's information they feel like is very valuable and should not be lost. And then one of the students in the group gathered information from children around the village about their own yards, about the plants in their own yards. Their yards are called solares, a solar, and they're big. And there are lots of plants in them. And part of the plants have been planted on purpose, like orange trees, lime trees. But part of the plants are native to the yard or have been brought in because they have medicinal purposes. So what do children learn about those, and when do they learn, and how, and from whom do they learn? And what we found, of course, is that mothers and grandmothers were tremendously instrumental in both their sons and daughters learning about what was in their yard and how to use it. You know, Johnny, go pick me a shkambaha to put in the salad. And he had to know what that meant in both Maya and Spanish, basically. Case studies of Maya charcoal. This only one of the men in the village, produced charcoal by burning a slow burning in anaerobic mound young trees to make big chunks of charcoal. And he wanted us to take photographs of the entire process, the several day process, and the final product. And he explained it all very carefully. And I'm so elated because he subsequently passed away, and we still have all of that documentation and have put together a book in his honor. Identifying plants used in the cha-cha ceremony, the rain calling ceremony. And we created a film in Maya, in Spanish, and in English of this important ceremony that's still done in order to guarantee the success of the corn crop. And I will tell you, every time I have played that disco of the ceremony, it rains. I'll just say that. Okay, let's go somewhere else really quickly. This is Belize. This is the Blue Creek station, archaeological station in northwestern Belize. And so it's the camp and laboratory for my research program. So this is an entirely different kind of botanical collection project. My research program bought an archaeology site. Archaeologists don't buy archaeology sites. It never happens. But we realized that this little piece of land that was not being protected was going to be raked and raised just like these fields are, and these fields back here that are green. And the site would be destroyed, and this jungle, what we're calling a forest island or a jungle island, would be destroyed as well. And so we were able to put together enough money to buy the archaeology site, which is right back in here, and a bunch of the land around it. What you see right here at the Plain Strut is actually the river that separates Mexico from Belize. So the little dark areas on the other side of this light is Mexico. Here's the Gray Fox archaeology site. It's not been excavated at all, but it has been mapped. So why would we want to do a baseline plant gathering project on an archaeology site? Well, it can shed light on climate change over time, from the time of Maya collapse until now. It can provide then and now comparisons of like pollen and phytolith samples from the excavations that talk about climate. It can increase the comprehension of shifting subsistence patterns, which might help learn about the technology the Maya were building on, might help you learn something about the Maya fall in that area. That help MRP understand how to be good stewards of that beautiful neotropical area that is the forest island. And then, of course, once you've got the data, there could be questions we don't even know to ask that could be, that the data can help provide some insights to. So here we are at the archaeology site, and I think you can begin to see that there might be something back in those trees. The gentleman with the machete in his hand is the cartographer who tramped through the whole area and did that wonderful map. He's a tough guy. And I think you can see better that we're over a great big mound. And so this is where we're going to gather plants. And if you don't believe we're on an archaeology site, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 7, there we go, 7, 8 pot shards just on the ground we're walking on everywhere we gathered plants. And I also see, of the 3 plants there, I see 2 that are edible. This is a piper in the genus Piper, which means pepper. And this is a native wild papaya. And then this, I don't know if this little vine is edible. Everything's edible once, but it's a useful vine for weaving. So already we've gathered a bunch of data just by looking at what's on the ground. Get in the truck every morning, go out, try to get as far into the jungle as you can on the site. And once again, like I showed you the picture of the cenote, and training your eye to look at the difference in the land, in the plants around the cenote. Look at these plants here. These are cajon palms, and cajon palms are planted. Now, nobody's lived on this land since the Maya left. We've got it documented down to the very core, and we know that from the historical records. So these are children of children of when the Maya lived there, when the ancient Maya lived there. Can't go any farther in the truck, so you get your stuff out of the truck, your plant presses, so we can go gather plants. And we start gathering plants. And you might notice that right here we have our, on a stick, we're burning a mosquito coil because there are creepy crawlies. When you're out in the field like this, it's rainy season. Archaeologists only work in rainy season because they're professors and students, and they can only come in the summer, and that's the rainy season. So we've got big blue tarps, and we have to protect all of this stuff, this newspaper and cardboard. And then when it starts raining, they get the tarps and we sit out in the rain. And every day you get so wet that you can't get any wetter. And then it's time to eat your sandwich. And so you're sort of, you're squeezing out your sandwich and sort of sucking it out of your hand in the rain. And it's sometimes, a 76-year-old woman sitting on the ground like Buddha says, why am I here? At those sort of times. But then the sun comes out, the rain blows away, and everything sparkles, everything's covered in diamonds from the raindrops. And the birds start, the beautiful colored tropical birds, toucans and oropindla. And they start making these wonderful noises and calling to each other in the jungle. And then a little spider monkey baby wakes up and his hair's kind of tousled like a kid getting up from a nap and starts yelling at you. You still hear you gringos. And then ultimately a tapir, a big one, walks out of the woods and down to the water hole. Well, it can't get any better than that. So you go back the next year. And again, here we are back at the lab in the afternoon, getting our stuff ready for the dryer. And wait for it. There's our dryer. We made a good one because we had a whole lot more specimens this year. I think this is like a 7 light bulber, but it's just, you can see it's just made, cobbled together out of junk we found around the research site. I'm going to stop. I don't know whether that did anybody any good. But let me tell you, a different way we were able to help is to gather specimens. We gathered quadruplets. The first and foremost went to the National Librarian of Belize. So that was our give back. That was our ethical move. And when we gathered them, we dried them completely. We mounted them on archival paper, labeled them as best we could. We don't know all of the identifications yet, but then you leave places where people can go back and study them and do the identifications. We gathered an equal set for Britt, and we gathered a set for UT Tyler and for the University of Cincinnati, because all of those people wanted them for other projects they were involved in. So these are the folks I want to thank. First and foremost, the villagers in all the villages, Yaxina and Chimay in the Yucatan, and then San Felipe, where the Maya folks who work at the archaeology site and have become archaeology associates work, and my research program, Dr. Tom Gudajon, its director, and the Botanical Research Institute of Texas. Please go and look at the websites for MRP and for Britt. And then I always want to add a friend. So thank you. I would love to hear if folks have questions. Has anybody put anything in that I can, clear up, or just, comments you want to tell me to go away, whatever.
Grace, if you want to stop sharing, your slide is just black, or you can leave it like that if you want to leave that on there.
Okay.
I knew we should have given you 2 hours because we could all listen to you. And there were lots of comments that were just very appreciative of what you did. They found it fascinating. Some of the questions that came up, I think you ended up asking, which were ways that the locals helped instill their indigenous knowledge into what plants to collect. Well, that came through in the end, that you were looking for
Absolutely
plants that help solve, diabetes and
that's right,
and that sort of thing.
That's right.
I knew everyone here would love what you were doing. We've got some questions, and I want to point out one thing that I think is so valuable, which is why I zoned in on you purposefully, is because I think anyone who listened to what you just said would recognize the respect and care you have for the people you're collaborating with. That's what I've always picked up on with you, is that you're not there to take away what you want and scramble away and leave and write a journal article and be famous. You're developing relationships. And as we consider developing collaborative relationships with people in Central and South America and the Caribbean, I want us to keep that spirit in mind, that we're not there to pass our knowledge to them and run away. And we're not there to get research done that we can publish. We're there to have collaborative experiences. And so one of the questions that just came up is, oh gosh, they're flying in. Do you ever need teacher educator volunteers?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Especially the kids, want to learn, everybody wants to learn a little English. Some of the kids are pretty far along, and I'd say what might be English 101, because they get some in middle school and high school. But I don't know what it's called anymore, but ESL type teachers, even if you've got 2 weeks or 3 weeks to go and live in the village, and we've got it set up where you can live in, in a home and eat with the folks in the village, and then the community center. Um, the kids come to the community center in the evenings a lot to do their homework, and in the summertime they're out of school, and so can come in the daytime. Those who stay in the village, oftentimes in the summer they go into the city to try to make a little money. But so the young people kind of leave the village, some of them in the summer. But there are all kinds of people who really would love to further their English. Um, the big ruins of Chichen Itza are not that far away. And so the wood carving that the men do, well, and the women paint the wood carvings, and they take them up to the town of Piste where Chichen is and sell them. And they sometimes are selling to people who don't speak Spanish, and so they like knowing English. So anybody who wants to teach English is so welcome. But other things I've found, we've had a number of people who have some kinds of art skills. We've had oil painting classes to great success. We've had uh, puppeteers, so the kids go through a process of learning to write a puppet show, make puppets or marionettes, and of all kinds of nutty things, literally nutty things from the forest. Again, using what's at hand, corn shucks, corn cobs, it doesn't matter. And going around the village and asking women for little ragtag pieces of old clothes or lace left over from their repeals, or little bits of ribbon, and make puppets and marionettes, and showing the kids that you can use the trash to entertain in a very big way. Uh, learning to make paper mache, anything, and sticking corn on it and then painting it, can make a very pretty pencil pot or whatever. Using plastic bottles, stuffing plastic bottles and building a building out of them. Those are any of that. Teaching people how to compost correctly is a big deal. Look, hey, I can make dirt. This is a very, very, very rocky soil, and I know how to make dirt. That's a good thing. So yeah, if you've got any kind of skill, embroidery, three-dimensional embroidery, any making musical instruments out of, whatever, nothing. They're crying out for inventive, creative ways to learn about the world. And they want to have people come who have, it doesn't have to be really professional skills, and you can just contact me and we can set you up. And of
Well,
course,
and that's what,
my research program has a huge core of volunteers who just volunteer to go and dig at the archaeology site.
well, and I knew we were going to run out of time. There's only a couple minutes, and there are people in the chat that are saying they want to form a trip, they want to be a volunteer, they want to work with you, they want to contact you. So I think what we need to do is make sure that we have your contact information available for them. And would it be best to reach out through the Maya research program or through Brit or some other?
Just my email.
Okay.
You can reach out through my research program, yes. But Brit's website doesn't have a place to get to me, but you can just do gbascope@brit.org.
So we will make sure that everyone gets that information, because I think a lot of people are going to be inspired by what you're doing and want to find a way to become involved in some way.
Well, do it quickly because I'm getting old.
It has been such a pleasure to have you. It really has. Oh, we've got people chatting about how to get into the next sessions, which are going to start in 5 minutes. So we so appreciate your efforts, and we want to consider you a friend of ICRSME officially now.
Thank
And
you.
we'll try to get things posted on the ICRSME website that links over to the Maya Research Program and your work through Brit. So thank you so much for
My
blessing us
pleasure.
all once
My
again.
pleasure.
You're amazing.
Happy rest of the conference.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.